Hey everyone, welcome to the Be Good and Do Good podcast, a show where we delve into our own unique experiences during our time as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm your host, Jake, here alongside my brother and co-host, John. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking at our comments. We actually have some comments from
Oh my
previous
gosh, we're
videos.
moving up in the world. This is how it starts.
We have a fan base. It's pretty awesome.
I mean, it's somebody that we know,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah. He's one
I'm
of our
totally
good
fine with
friends.
that. One of our good friends from our ward back home in California.
Yeah. He's been commenting on all of our videos, which I really appreciate. Thank you. I'm not going to mention his name, but I mean his at sign is at Che Parisi. This is on YouTube. He's commented on a lot of our videos. The one that I wanted to actually talk about is a correction that he made to Brianna's Germany soccer story that she talked about, and how Argentina lost. Anyways, this is what he says. Fun to hear all your mission stories. I want to hear more. I am going to be that soccer nerd and correct Brianna. In 2014, Germany won with a last-minute goal in something stupid like 121 minutes, I believe. To Brianna's defense, Argentina lost two more finals in the Copa America tournament the following years, back-to-back, and both of them were losses in penalties. Also stupid, pero ya fue.
What does that mean? Pero ya fue.
It's like, well, I mean, that's what happens.
Oh, like that's life type thing.
That's life. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is definitely a rough start for any potential Argentina fans out there because we're talking about like the woes of the 2014, 2015 kind of seasons or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So Brianna said that it was penalty kicks, I think,
I
that
think that's what she
that
said.
they
Yeah.
lost against Germany, but it turns out it was just like a last second goal, which is kind of a bummer.
It's always a bummer when you're about to, I guess, tie maybe in this instance, and
Yeah.
then someone gets a goal on you and you lost, but
Yeah, that is a bummer. And like in terms of correcting our soccer knowledge, like, bro, keep correcting our soccer knowledge because I would do the same exact thing if anybody like mentioned BYU or Roger Federer or tennis in general. I'd be like, actually, Roger Federer won the 2017 Wimbledon final, not the 2018 Wimbledon final, which is true.
which is true.
Which is unfortunately true. He lost. Well, he didn't even play the final in 2018, but
Yeah.
yeah, no. Anytime we like, there's probably going to be a lot of mistakes that we make, especially in regards to sports knowledge. So please let us know what it is that we messed up, because we'll be the first ones to admit that we definitely don't do all of our research the way we should. So
Well, and I'm thinking, like, if any of our listeners are actually from our missions and have a different recollection of the stories that we're telling, definitely correct us, at least somewhere on YouTube, on Instagram, on we need those corrections.
yes, right. Isn't it from the mouth of two or three witnesses, all things shall be established? So don't
Yeah.
take our word for it. That's what we would always tell the people when we like committed them or taught them restoration. We'd be like, don't take our word for it. Read the Book of Mormon and pray about it. So by that same token, don't take our word for it. Please let us know, I guess, the things that maybe we might have missed the first time.
Hopefully we haven't.
I mean, I'm sure we have, but
Yeah.
I like your optimism. Good for you.
Yeah.
In terms of other things that are newsworthy, especially, unfortunately, today we have to announce that Sister Patricia Holland, who is the wife of Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, who we've talked about multiple times on this podcast, just in the few episodes that we've done thus far. Sister Patricia Holland passed away peacefully. Today we're recording this on July 20th, and we just found out the news.
Yeah, I saw a post about it on Instagram from the church newsroom, and one of the things that I thought was very pertinent, at least probably to your life, is, I mean, not probably to your life as well, Jake, is something that Elder Holland said about Patricia. He said, her faith has always been as pure and powerful and strong as any person I have ever known. She's a very charitable person. She has given and given and given of her time and of her love all of her life. And I think about this in terms of like my wife and your wife and all the wonderful mothers out there, all the wonderful wives that have given and given and given and have put up with us.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah,
I've while I was on my mission, I listened to a lot of devotionals that Elder Holland gave at BYU. Um, and like without fail, he would mention his wife in every single one of his devotionals. And so I kind of feel like even though I don't know her or haven't heard from her quite as much as I've heard from her husband, I feel like I know the type of person that she was, and I know some
yeah,
of her backstory as well. She was an incredible person, and she will definitely be missed.
yeah, definitely instrumental in the life of one of our favorite apostles.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, on that note, I guess we'll try
yeah,
to liven things up a little bit after that
yeah,
sad news. But last week, we talked about a few different things, meeting our trainers being one of the main things, as well as being assigned to our first areas and traveling to said areas, which was faster for some of us than for others.
hmm,
So if you didn't have a chance to listen to that podcast, just be sure to go back into our archives. They should all be there. Whether you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube, they're right there on our channel or our, I guess, bio account. What are they called on Spotify?
yeah,
Artist name?
yeah. Artist name.
Yeah,
uh-huh. Be good and do good podcast. Yeah, everything.
nailed
Sorry.
it.
Yeah, I was thinking of our email for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, so Be Good and Do Good podcast on Spotify and on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Uh,
this week, we would like to talk a little bit about our first, full weeks in the mission field. We kind of just mainly spanned over the course of like the first day or two during last week's podcast, just because there was a lot to get to with trainers and areas and that type of thing. But now we're getting into, I guess, the nitty gritty of what mission life is actually like. So, John, what are some of the highlights from your first week in the mission field?
well, I'm. You said that you whitewash your area?
I did not. I did
Oh, you
not
didn't.
whitewash my
Okay,
area.
so for those of you listening, I brought up a term right now, whitewashing an area. For those of you that don't know what whitewash means, it's taking the elders or sisters that were there previously and putting two new missionaries in their place. It's literally starting an area like new. And that's something that happened to me and my companion elder elephant while we were in my first area. Um, so usually, and I didn't know this at the time, like it took me a long time, like probably a couple weeks before I figured out, oh, I had whitewashed this area. My companion and me are new to this area, but also well, the funny thing about that is my companion had already served in that area, just came
Mhm.
back to train me. So usually whitewashing has a bad connotation. It literally means in in I looked it up on the
The
just
Urban Dictionary.
Google dictionary says deliberately attempt to conceal unpleasant or incriminating facts about someone or something. So
Yeah.
so usually you don't want your area to be whitewashed when you're on a mission because that means that the person that you're serving with isn't going to be there if you get transferred out of that area, not going to be there, and so they can't like take the helm and lead the area. Some two new people are going to be there, you know, and you don't want that to happen. I think that's why it got the term whitewashing. you
I
know
always just assumed it was because elders wore white shirts and you're whitewashing with new elders, but I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be elders either. I think I did hear at one point that pinkwashing was when two sisters came in and like whitewashed an area, but because it's sisters, it's pinkwashing. I don't know. I
I've
don't
never
know if
heard
this
that one
I
before.
I mean, it might have been after your time, or
That sounds like a Pennsylvania Pittsburgh mission thing or
I don't
something.
know, or
Just
maybe it's
messing.
only maybe yeah, I honestly don't even really know if that's what it
Pinkwashing, huh?
is. But I never had to whitewash an area, so I definitely don't know the lingo that well.
Well, when I think of whitewashing, I think of Tom Sawyer when he had to paint the fence white. Does anybody know that reference?
I don't even know that reference.
Yeah, I mean, in the book Tom Sawyer, at the very beginning of the book, he paints a fence white because his parent, or like his parents in quotes, want him to like to make that fence nicer looking than it already is,
Mm.
covering up stuff that they don't want other people to see.
Yeah,
So
and that's kind of the connotation is unfortunately that whitewashing has on the mission. Like a lot of times it's because maybe the missionaries that were in that ward previously were not
the
they weren't
best.
well, either they weren't doing the best or they weren't having a ton of like noticeable success in the area. And
Mhm.
so the mission president or whoever it might be that helps to make that decision um decides that maybe it would just be best to kind of have a fresh start,
Yeah,
which
first start.
I honestly don't necessarily know if that's always the case. Like
Yeah, it isn't.
like
It isn't always the case.
like, it might
Sometimes,
definitely might be the case in some of those situations, but not always.
yeah, yeah, and it. I mean, and it was a different kind of whitewash for me. It was like I said, it was my first area, and it was my companion's second time serving in the area. So it wasn't like we had gone in without any knowledge at all.
Yeah,
My companion had knowledge of this area and wanted to see people that he knew and served around, just he hadn't had recent knowledge of the
yeah.
people. So,
Which, like, that could very well be a reason why you guys were whitewashed because he had already served in that area, and
yeah,
maybe some of the people that he had taught at the time that weren't progressing then maybe are progressing now. And
yeah.
so, like
And to this day, I don't really know why we got whitewashed
yeah,
in an area. So,
mhm.
I mean, it's up for speculation. So,
Like, I would
what
almost think that, like well, since you were being trained in this area,
mhm.
which what was the name of the area?
Marshalltown.
Okay, so you were being trained in Marshalltown. I almost feel like it would be nice for the trainee to get whitewashed into an area because in that situation, you're kind of on equal footing with your trainer.
Uh-huh.
Like, which I mean, in this case, your trainer had already served there. So he still knew some of the members in the ward. He still
Yeah.
knew some potential people that you were going to be teaching.
Yeah.
But like in other situations, that might not necessarily be a thing. And so both of you are learning the ward at the same time. Both of you are learning the people at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily the missionary skills, but I feel like, well, because for me, while I was training,
Uh-huh.
it was really intimidating to me that my trainer knew all
That
of the streets and all of the names and
yeah,
everything. And I felt like I was kind of behind in a
makes
lot of
sense.
in that regard. So I feel like I don't know, maybe in some situations it would
Uh,
be nice to get whitewashed.
yeah, I can see what you're saying. Like it put us on a similar footing kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely. For sure I can see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, what about you? What happened in your first area?
So my first area was I mentioned this briefly last week, but it was called Lewisberry, which is funny because the city of Lewisberry has like 100 people in it or something, but
Wow.
which is I don't really know why they might have called it the Lewisberry area because that's the city that the church building was in. But like
Okay.
we so there was two sets of missionaries in that ward, um, elders and sisters, a pair of elders and a pair of sisters,
Gotcha.
and neither one of us spent like hardly any time in Lewisberry. So that's probably the only reason why like Lewisberry for me was not technically in my area because I was in the bike area and then the sisters had a car and so they were called the Lewisberry Drive sisters and we
Uh-huh.
were the Lewisberry bike elders. Um so yeah, we were primarily in the cities of New Cumberland and Lemoyne and Camp Hill. This probably means nothing to anybody, but maybe one person listening knows exactly where these things are. Camp Hill was probably the biggest like city that was in our area.
Okay.
Um, So
How many people were in Camp Hill that you can think of?
I don't know, a few, like probably like
I mean, I can look
across
it up right now.
across my yeah, I mean you can look it up if you would like. Camp Hill was probably the more well, like that's where the Walmart was. And so
Oh, okay.
that's why I say that was probably the bigger city, but like I don't even necessarily know if it was big.
It says 8,170 in 2021.
Gotcha. So that, I mean that makes sense. Like not like a ton of people, but a few thousand people in Camp
Few
Hill,
thousand.
a few
Uh-huh.
thousand in New Cumberland and Lemoyne. It was a suburb of Harrisburg, so it was right across the river from Harrisburg.
Okay.
And so that's like the big, big, big city that's close by, but that wasn't in my area, of course.
Yeah.
So I remember just from the first few, or the first week or two, or first few weeks, honestly, the main thing that stuck out to me was how physically difficult being in a bike area was for me.
Yeah.
Like,
For you
yeah, I mean,
specifically.
well, and I say that because once again, my companion, he had a ton of biking experience before the mission.
Uh-huh.
And I had like I knew how to ride a bike. But other than that, like I hadn't really biked a ton for my entire life.
Uh-huh.
And so going from like nothing to like biking to get everywhere and anywhere to all of our appointments and everything was like hell, honestly. Like, and it was like it was the heat of summer. It was
Yeah.
July,
Yeah.
in humid Pennsylvania. Like, I was not
Prepared.
prepared by any means. Like, it was hard, and I I don't know. I felt so inadequate so quickly, not necessarily because of teaching lessons or contacting, although I felt inadequate because of that too. But
Uh-huh.
initially, the first hump that I had to get over, which I didn't get over for a while after this, was adjusting to riding a bike everywhere.
Yeah.
And I hated it. Like, honestly, like it was I never again had a bike area. I had walk or bus areas, but never again like a bike area. And I think that's intentional because I complained to my mission president, like, this sucks. Like,
Yeah.
I was not prepared for this. And I would frequently like run into my mission companion, Elder White, who would like, because you can't ride next to each other, like
Mhm.
when you're biking as elders, because that's like dangerous on the
Yeah.
streets, especially like you
Yeah,
have to ride
definitely.
like one in front of the other.
Yeah.
And so
If
initially he was
so
always in the front.
if he was ever in the front, you had to, like, catch up to him, and he was probably,
Well,
like, way ahead
yeah,
of
I had
you.
to like there would be times when like I would lose sight of him, honestly, like because he would turn a street and I'd be like, okay, he's down that street, and he would have to slow down, and like yeah. Or sometimes I would try to catch up with him and would follow him too closely. And
Oh, n what?
if you're not
Not a
paying
good bike
attention,
rider?
yeah, if you're not a good bike rider and you're not paying attention, like
Um,
you could easily hit your companion. And
yeah.
like that definitely happened to me a couple of times. I remember one time in particular, Elder White was really good about talking to everybody,
Yeah.
on like whether they were on the sidewalk or at a restaurant or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, we were biking past, I think it was Burger King, and
Okay.
he stops, like goes on his brake, like really, really suddenly. And Burger King was at the bottom of a hill.
Yeah.
So we were going down this hill and he bikes very suddenly to stop and talk to this guy who was walking out of Burger King.
Okay.
And I was not paying attention as well as I could have, or even if I was, like it was at the bottom of a hill. And so
Yeah.
I was gathering speed, wasn't paying attention. And so he's like, hey, like, how are you? We're the missionaries, blah, blah. And like, boom, I just like while he's in the middle of talking to me, I just like T-bone my companion,
Oh
and
my
it
goodness.
was so embarrassed. Like, I honestly can't remember what the dude's reaction was. I just
Did
remember feeling mortified,
did you, like,
because
fall into Elder White?
I definitely hit him, and I probably fell or knocked him over.
That's
Probably
crazy.
maybe both, honestly. But it was just like that's just a little anecdote to show you how hard being a bike elder was for me. Like, and it's kind
Yeah.
of embarrassing because, I mean, it's not necessarily like, I mean, biking is something you learn when you're a kid, and yet that was one of the hardest aspects, at least in the first couple of weeks, for me to get adjusted to.
Yeah, I also had to get a bike in my first area, which we kept throughout like each of the areas that I served in
Hmm.
afterwards. But I also remember an instance where I wasn't with my companion. I was with the other. I was on exchanges with the other English elder. So in my area in Marshalltown, there were two sets of elders. It was the Spanish elders and the English elders.
Hmm.
And anyways, I was on exchanges with another English elder, and he was just like careening. He was just like so fast, and I was like, for instance, me and Elder Elephant, we would be on our bikes, but we never went like too fast. Elder Elephant was tall, but he never like tried to go any faster. I don't know, maybe because he had compassion on me, hopefully.
That is really, yeah. That was, and like my companion had compassion on me too. Like he was
Yeah,
definitely very understanding of my inability to bike, but it was something that never really troubled him because he biked a lot back
yeah.
home. And so it's like one of those things you don't even think about until somebody has that problem.
Gotcha. And I just remember being on the exchanges, and I'm like, what in the world is up with this elder that I'm not ever on exchanges with? And now I'm like having to catch up with him. What's going on? Like, what's his hurry? So,
It's a
um,
really, what's the word? Urgent work
yeah,
or earnest, or I can't remember, but I feel like they're always saying the Lord is hastening his work, so we got to be very urgent. So maybe he was just trying to be as obedient as possible.
yeah, definitely. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first couple of days, I guess, like getting into a routine. And this was kind of like the normal routine. Like we would uh first of all, we'd either have an appointment or not have an appointment, and on our way to said appointment or on our way to our destination, if it wasn't an appointment, we'd always like stop and talk to people,
Yeah.
In fact, like my I have this is like the second day of the journal entries that I have. It says walk to contact a referral, bumped into people. And then I have three instances. An old man that has lived here since 1963 doesn't believe that prayer is a two-way communication, shared James 1:5 about asking with faith, gave us some neighborly references. Bumped into a girl named Jennifer who I think is from Newton originally. She spoke English and was watching her kids and nephew named Junior with the biggest smile that a little cholo baby boy can have.
A
She
little
is
cholo baby
That's what
boy.
I wrote in my journal. Yeah.
Oh gosh, John.
She is a single mom going to get married after school has started. And then talked to a man from Mexico that was building a fence with either his son or grandson. He was willing to talk to us until we brought out a Book of Mormon. He just closed his heart at that sight. I tried to testify, but he just didn't want to hear about it. So I mean
Yeah.
that was like a normal day. You would walk to your destination. In this instance, it was a referral,
Mhm.
and you would just bump into random people out on the street, and like those three instances, completely different instances, but like it was just like that was just like a normal day in the life of a missionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing that happened, I don't know if it was like the first day or second day, or it was very, very early. I had my first lesson with, um, I guess my first lesson in general with people that we were teaching. Um, and it was nothing like what I anticipated it would be like. Like when you're in the missionary training center, you are sitting down, like a nice comfy couch or a nice comfy chair or
Uh-huh.
something, and
Yeah.
talking to somebody else who doesn't have any distractions. There's no TV on in the background. like you mentioned, that wait, never mind.
We were talking before this about somebody that had the TV on in the background.
Yeah,
So
I
Dick
was
is
like,
just
oh yeah, I was anyways.
before the podcast.
Yes, before the podcast. For some reason, thought that happened during the podcast. But TVs can be very distracting when they're in the
Yes, they can.
background. When they're in the background of, of something important or something that you're trying to get people to focus on.
Yeah.
And we taught these two teenagers. That was my first lesson. These two teenage girls, Alyssa and Ariel were their names. One of them was 17 and the other one was like just barely a teenager, like at 13 years old. And it was like the most informal like lesson that it possibly could have been. So I remember showing up to the house, and I'm sure I'll talk more about Alyssa and Ariel like in future podcasts, because they were actually a big part of my mission.
Gotcha.
Not just them, but their family in general. But I remember showing up, and like we couldn't go inside the house because there were no men that were present.
Yeah.
And you, like, for those who are unfamiliar, you can't go into a house when an adult member of the opposite of your gender is present. So if we want to teach any woman or any child or whatever,
Yeah.
um, we need to make sure that a member of our gender is present. Otherwise, we have to do it outside,
Yeah.
or we have to reschedule.
Yeah. It's
Or
a safeguard for.
yeah, which like is totally understandable in this
Yeah.
day and age. Like, unfortunately it's necessary. Like, you've got to.
It is.
And so we showed up, talked to their mom, Stephanie, and she was like, "Oh, like my husband is not here. Like, you're going to have to do it outside," and that was fine. So we like sat down, um, like on their back deck or their back porch or whatever it might be, and tried in vain to teach these two teenagers about the restoration. Um,
So
oh
what
wait, no,
happened?
maybe it wasn't the restoration. Maybe it was the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is generally the third lesson, but you
Yeah.
can mix and match, the lessons. This was one of our first few lessons with them. And it was about as good as you would expect it to be, teaching two teenage girls who don't really know or care that much about, like, or I guess maybe I should just say their attention span was very limited. And like, religion is definitely not necessarily the most popular thing. Like, you rarely ever like talk about religion or Jesus or whatever it might be, like at school, and that's not going to be like something that's going to gain you any like popularity points or anything necessarily. And so I just remember thinking that, like, no matter what I did, I just was not great at keeping their attention. And
Mm.
so,
So what were they distracted by? Do you know?
well, I mean, what are teenagers distracted by
Their
nowadays?
phones,
Their
maybe,
phones,
or
they're scrolling on Instagram, or maybe their dog or whatever. I think their dog might have come up and like kind of gotten in the middle of a lesson, or
yeah,
the mom like might not necessarily have known that we were in the middle of something important, so she came and talked to her daughter about whether she did her homework. Or this might not necessarily have happened that way, but like it was typical stuff like that,
yeah,
and these girls had very little background when it came to religion at all. Their mother was actually a self-proclaimed atheist. So it was a miracle that she was letting us teach her daughters to begin with. Um, but it was just really hard to kind of keep and maintain their attention and teach them simple things that you would expect most people to know and understand, like
mhm,
who Jesus is, what his role was on the earth,
yeah,
which all Christians, know for the most part. And I just remember like thinking that it was nothing like the MTC, and that I needed to be more informal than I was potentially prepared to.
yeah.
Like, yeah, like, did you ever have a situation like that where maybe you kind of needed to like change maybe the way that you were planning on teaching a lesson, because whatever you're planning or you were planning just doesn't work out.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's just like you never know what's going to happen in the lesson. And so you go in thinking that you're going to teach it one way, and then you have to like I remember like having to like totally scrap the lesson that we had prepared
Hmm.
and do something totally different.
Yeah.
I don't remember who that was with, and I think like if I had like a journal entry in front of me, I'd remember. But it's like that with a lot of the lessons that you go into because you never know what's gonna pop up.
Yeah, that's something that you always have to be prepared for, right? That's why you study every single morning, not
Yeah,
only about what you're planning on teaching, but other things that maybe you weren't planning on teaching, but you might have to teach. And so, um, I remember kind of changing the way that I spoke. And like, I mean, I was 18. No, yes, I was 18 at the time, almost 19. And so
gotcha.
really I was talking to a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. Like these are teenage people
Yeah.
who are not far off from where I was even a year ago. And
Hmm.
so I remember changing, I kind of spoke a little bit more casually, but still with conviction. I remember kind of comparing, the gospel to like pop culture references that they might understand, or
Yeah.
that like Harry Potter or like Marvel or whatever it might be, something
Uh-huh.
that was popular at the time.
Yeah.
And that definitely worked. Like it likes their attention. And while maybe it wasn't necessarily the most reverent way to talk about these doctrinal principles, like the spirit can help, uh, I guess, kind of
Like in
what's
or like make it something in their minds that like
yeah, like the spirit can help to make up the difference or what I'm lacking, what I'm teaching. And so
yeah,
all I can do is teach with conviction in a way that I feel the people will understand, and hope and
yeah,
pray that they are allowing the spirit into their hearts, because the spirit's undoubtedly there if I'm preaching and I guess testifying with conviction.
yeah. I didn't know this at the time, and you're talking about like likening the gospel to Marvel and other different, things that
Yeah,
pop culture references, right?
yeah.
Um, like that's I would say if that's how your brain works, and you're gonna go on a mission, definitely go for it. Like people relate to this kind of stuff, and they'll be able to like see the connections that you're making as long as it's not too far off, and
Mhm.
I you said irreverent, but I don't think it's that irreverent. I think it just depends how you present yourself when you're doing this. Are you trying to testify of Christ? Then yeah, I think it works,
Yeah, and that, I guess that was, I mean, it's my first lesson, but that was
Yeah, your
like, I
first
guess,
lesson.
my first real encounter with trying to teach from me and not necessarily trying to teach from the manual. You know what I mean? It's like in
Yeah.
Preach My Gospel, like it'll very clearly and concisely express what the lesson is going to be,
Mhm.
the key points that you should hit. But how you get there and the way that you teach is kind of left up to the individual missionary. It definitely has tips and
Mhm.
good rules of thumb, but I remember at one point there's that scene in Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
Still the best Indiana Jones movie in my opinion. I haven't seen the new one though,
I haven't
so
seen the new one
but I
either.
hear that one's good, but it better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But anyways, I mean that's not difficult to do.
S
But and see,
yeah.
this is me trying to stay reverent while discussing pop culture references. But I remember, for those of you who have seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is the third movie, he's trying to get the Holy Grail um, at the towards the end of the movie, and there's this bridge that he needs to cross, but he can't see the bridge. The bridge is almost like camouflaged into the side of a cliff, and he needs to cross this cliff, um, or he needs to
Yeah.
traverse this cliff, get from one side to the other while not being able to see that there's even a bridge there. And so
Uh-huh.
this is called like the leap of faith,
The
right?
leap of faith, yep.
Yeah, and so what Indiana Jones does is he gets like some dust or some grains or whatever that are just on the ground next to him in this tomb or wherever he is, and he tosses, some of those grains, and as a result, you can kind of see the bridge, I guess, the grains landing on the bridge, right? And
Well,
so,
actually, you forgot the best part. He doesn't even do that at first. He steps out. He takes a leap of faith. Do you remember that?
oh, actually, you're right. Which is, I guess, actually even more applicable to what I'm saying. Or
Yeah.
yeah, but he does. He takes a step without seeing the bridge initially.
And then he crosses, and then he throws the sand
And then
onto
he
the
throws the
bridge.
sand so he can keep seeing the bridge as he continues to cross.
Yeah.
Um, which, I mean, I guess is kind of cheating because it literally has the word faith in it, but I would use that to describe faith, for some people who maybe didn't understand, or for some people who are big movie nerds like me. Like, everybody remembers that scene. And it's a good way to explain how faith is, believing in something that you can't see, but as you take that leap of faith, you'll
Uh-huh.
be able to kind of build your testimony and continue to strengthen that faith, which will help you to, I guess, learn the truthfulness of the things that the missionaries were teaching. So,
Yeah.
like, I definitely would use informal references and sometimes informal language,
Mm.
to maintain attention, but
Yeah.
still spoke with like the conviction that missionaries should speak with when testifying.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is like a way that you want to connect with those that you're teaching. I had an instance on my first couple of days where I was teaching. Well, I went to a family's house for dinner. I'm going to call them Felipe and Jimena's house
Mhm.
for our 4th of July dinner. And Jimena was kind of on the wild side. She was a member, but she had kind of gotten back into smoking, and like to demonstrate how wild she was. Like on the first time I met her at this particular dinner, she brought out a taser gun to show to her friends, and like she's like, "Hey, I got guys, I have a taser," you know.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. But I mean, in reference to connecting with those people that you're trying to teach, um, I was able to connect with Jimena by she was talking to me about how she's stressed out about tornadoes, which actually is a thing when you go to Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
Tornado, like every Tuesday in Marshalltown, they would have a tornado warning at like 10 a.m. There's a siren that would go off at 10 a.m. just so that you would be prepared to hear it and everything.
Okay.
But anyways, tornadoes are a big thing in Iowa. So she told me how much these things scared her and they stressed her out, and that's one of the reasons why she went back to smoking. Not to mention like she had kids, like little kids, and those like she was worrying about them as well. Anyways, I I thought about how I could connect with her, and I thought of telling her, and I told her about the time that a time that I was at home all alone in Fontana, where both Jake and I are from in California, and the big thing in California are there's earthquakes, and I was home all alone. I think the mom and dad were at work, and Jake and my other two sisters, they were at school, but there was an earthquake that happened and I was so scared. Earthquakes, I don't know about who everybody else, but they freak me out a lot whenever I hear rumbling. Even if I'm like in a portable, I'm like, if I hear rumbling from the portable, like a portable room,
Uh-huh.
that freaks me out.
Like
So
like one of those, like, classrooms, like, in
like
a
those
school
classrooms,
that,
yeah.
like, oh, like a portable classroom that they
Like a
bring in?
portable classroom. Like,
Gotcha.
every time when I was in high school and we were in a portable and everybody would walk in them, I'd just be, like, looking around being like,
Yeah,
"Ah."
because it makes a lot of noise, like,
Oh,
anytime anything touches the floor,
uh-huh.
there's definitely rumbling, so I could definitely see how you could kinda compare that to be like an earthquake, potentially.
So it makes my heart drop, but there was an actual earthquake that happened, and I told, Jimena, I was like, "Jimena, my dad, he gave me a call after this earthquake, and I felt at peace with myself. And this is just like Heavenly Father. We can reach out to him anytime, and he's always there to listen. And I felt like when I told her that she was like touched, you know.
Uh-huh.
So definitely find ways to connect with those around you on the mission, including your companion and those people that you teach. So
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely feel like once I finally felt like I became a good teacher on my mission, which wasn't for months and years potentially, like in the future, I think it was because I stopped caring so much
yeah,
about maybe teaching the way I thought a good missionary would teach, and teaching in a way that felt natural to me. And that's when I felt like I was most effective and efficient when it came to connecting with the people that I taught. So thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, for sharing that cool experience.
One of the videos that I remember that you sent from your mission, Jake,
Uh-huh.
because Jake would always send back videos and pictures, was just a video of one of your investigators that later got baptized, of him teaching you guys a lesson. And it was just like, he taught it in his voice. It was just like so natural. He was like, this prophet quoted this right here, and you were like, yes, he quoted that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was my guy Carlos.
Yeah.
He was amazing. But yeah, we committed him to teach us the plan of salvation, and he made a PowerPoint. He made a
Yeah.
PowerPoint presentation and brought his laptop to the park where we met and taught us the plan of salvation and quoted President Kimball, I think, which was
President
crazy because he
Kimball.
wasn't
Yeah.
even baptized at that point, and we hadn't even talked about, President Kimball, or I think he quoted Pearl of Great Price, which
Yeah.
we had not taught him about that either. So, yeah,
But
like, he definitely taught it in his way, that's for sure.
yeah. So I mean, do it in the way that works.
Do it
Yeah.
in the way that works. It was effective. He kept
Yeah.
my attention. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I've loved talking about, this first week or so of our mission, and there's going to be plenty of stories like this going forward. Um, but
Definitely.
let's go ahead and transition to the next portion of our podcast, which is the scriptural nugget section, which I can see here in the notes that you have something prepared, hopefully, fingers crossed.
I do. My scriptural nugget is from when Jesus was talking to a man, and the man asked him a question. Is he asked, "Which is the great commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." Um, yeah, that's like when we're preaching the gospel, we we are showing our love for our neighbor. We are helping them come to Christ, and we're showing them how much we love God by teaching them how much we love God. So
That's interesting. Like, you kind of brought missionary work into this scripture, which when I read it, normally I think of, like, okay, serving, like feeding the poor, like caring for the sick and that type of thing. But missionary work is a form of service. Like, when we choose to share the gospel with those that we love, it's because we have been dramatically changed by the gospel and want to share that good news with other people.
yeah,
And so, if you're not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and maybe you have a buddy who is, and he is spontaneously decides to share a little tidbit about the church with you, it's because he loves you, and because he or she recognizes that, something that maybe you're going through or that you're talking about, um, is relevant to the gospel that he or she feels a lot of love and admiration for, if
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. And everyone's your neighbor. and
Mhm.
Christ said to love your neighbor. So yeah.
Neighbor is spelled with OU, not neighbor spelled with OR, which I think is interesting. I was reading that and I was like, why is it written like for British people? Like that's so bizarre. But I guess it's like
The King
because
James Bible.
yeah, I feel like the Spanish Book of Mormon that's translated as in vosotros.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's kind of like the formal language. So, like, maybe British English is the formal version of English. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but that explains why it's OUR
It's
maybe,
it's
not
the
OR.
King's language. British language is the King's language.
The King James's language, which was King
Possibly.
James from England. It sounds like an English name. I
Yeah,
honestly,
he was from England.
okay, I have no idea. I honestly should know history a lot better than I do, but
Yeah. All right. Do you have a preach my gospel nugget?
yes, on that note, I
Yeah.
would like to share my preach my gospel nugget. This was something that, well, first of all, it's from the new Preach My Gospel, which was my first time opening it. So I just want a little bit of recognition for that because I've gone through a few of these Preach My Gospel nuggets without opening it and using the old version, but this is the new and updated version.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate the recognition. Now, with that,
You have been formally recognized. Now get to it. Just kidding.
okay. Yes, sir. Um, I was
Yeah.
thinking about something that was relevant, I guess, to me today. And after hearing the news about Pat Holland, um, and kind of just sympathizing with what Elder Holland might be experiencing, it made me think about the plan of salvation, which is something that we teach, uh, or we as missionaries and former missionaries teach and discuss regularly, which is the idea that God has a plan for all of us, um, which will ultimately allow us to return to live with Him again after some trials and some tests. And that's a very, very quick, you know, description of it. But one key aspect of the plan of salvation is the resurrection, which is I guess I'll go ahead and read this quote from Preaching My Gospel. It says, as mortals, each of us will die. However, because Jesus triumphed over death, every person born on earth will be resurrected. The resurrection is a divine gift for all, given through the Savior's mercy and redeeming grace. Each person's spirit and body will be reunited, and each of us will live forever in a perfected, resurrected body. If not for Jesus Christ, death would end all hope for a future existence with Heavenly Father. So, I guess this is just pure, unadulterated doctrine from Preach My Gospel about what the resurrection is. It's the opportunity that all of us, everybody, if you're listening to this podcast, that includes you, literally everybody on earth that has come here will be resurrected, which means their body and their spirit will once again reunite after death. And that's always been a pertinent piece of doctrine for me, just because I think about death just like any human frequently, right? We are here on earth to, to change, to grow, to develop, and hopefully we can do all of the change and growth and development that we can before we die. But death is imminent for all of us, unfortunately. But the knowledge the knowledge of the resurrection, the fact that me, as well as those who I've loved, who have passed on, will once again live and be able to be reunited at some point after death. Like, to me, that means everything.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It reminds me of those who have passed that I know. Um, Specifically like our family members that have passed, like our grandpa, and on the Spanish side, our mama and our papa, um, all of which had great and beautiful lives. And um, without this doctrine, it would just it would just be meaningless. But because of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the plan of salvation, those that die will be able to be resurrected, and will be able to receive their bodies again and be able to change the things that they weren't able to change here on earth, and all because of Jesus Christ. So it's just a beautiful doctrine, beautiful, pure, like you said, pure,
No, John, I actually pronounced it right. This is
you
not
did.
like I said.
Unadulterated
There we
doctrine.
go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna say our question for the day. For this podcast, we're talking a little bit about mission lingo. What mission lingo did you have to learn on the mission, and what does it mean? We want to hear from you. We want to know all the strange and weird idiosyncrasies or just jargon that your mission had, and it'd be fun to hear any like weird stuff that we can come up with.
I'm sure there's a ton that I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
just like how John didn't know what whitewashed meant before he entered the mission, I'm sure there's a lot that I still definitely don't know. I know last week we talked about father and daughter
yeah.
in reference to companions and trainers, and that type of thing.
Being born in the mission.
Being born in the mission, dying in the mission once your mission is over. Like, there's just so much lingo that I'm sure has developed and changed even since I got home like 4 years ago. I can't remember. We
Yeah,
talked about this. I think it was 4 years ago. But yeah, please share that mission lingo with us. We want to hear about it.
yeah. With that, I think we'll close out. Yeah, thank you so much for listening to our podcast today. We really appreciate it. We have been having lots of fun sharing all of our experiences and just like going back down memory lane, and we're going to continue to have some fun. If you want to reach out to us, go ahead and reach out to us at our email at begooddogoodpod@gmail.com. And you can also watch this podcast on YouTube. You'll find it at youtube.com/@begooddogoodpod. Make sure you rate us and follow us wherever you watch us or listen to us.
Yes. Thank you so much once again. And dude, I need to get through the end. Here we go. Thank you so much. No, I'm just kidding. And remember to be good and do good.
Awesome.